Welcome to Party Street.
Today we are going to discuss about the transition debate. One of the most lively academic debates in recent times relate to the question of what led to the decline of feudalism and the emergence of the capitalist mode of production that led to the creation of the modern world. This is commonly called the transition debate. Not only has a controversy arisen on this issue between the Marxist and the non-Marxist, there is also complete disagreement even within the Marxist group of writers. These scholars have some fundamental differences over the concept of feudalism and capitalism and on the causes and the nature of transition from one mode of production to another. Henri Pirenne dates the beginning of capitalism to the 12th century in a work titled Economic and Social History of Medieval Europe. According to him, it was a result of growing trading activities. This unending controversy began in real sense with the publication of Maurice Dobb's stimulating work, Studies in the Development of Capitalism, in 1946. Dobb argued that the decline of feudalism was the result of inner or internal contradictions within the feudal mode of production. His views are strongly supported and elaborated by scholars like Rodney Hilton, Boris Porchnev, Christopher Hill, Kohachiro Takahashi, and many others. For Dobb, there are two chief elements related to transition. The first is a system of production resting on serf labor or subject peasantry, while the second is based on hired wage labor. These represent two separate phases of transition. What are the historical motive forces, Dobb asks, that caused disintegration of the feudal system of exploitation and led to a virtual crisis in the feudal society of the Western Europe and brought its end? He suggests that this question has to be answered by taking into account the unevenness of the process as well as the chronological differences between various regions and the factors that led to the introduction and extension of serfdom over previously free cultivators. Secondly, the disintegration of feudalism has to be explained in relation to the rise of wage labor under the bourgeois or the capitalist method of production. Thus, for Dobb, the development of capitalism falls into a number of stages characterized by its level of maturity. Dobb disagrees with Henri Pirenne, who dates the beginning of capitalism to the 12th century. Nor does he accept 14th century as its beginning, when there was the rise in urban trade and guild handicrafts. Instead, Dobb locates its beginning in the latter half of the 16th and the early part of the 17th centuries, when capital began to penetrate production on considerable scale. Dobb insists that under the feudal mode of production, an obligation is always placed on a producer by force and independent of his volition to fulfill certain economic demands of an overlord. This demand may take the form of services or dues, in money or in kind, or in the form of gifts. The coercive power may be because of the military strength possessed by the feudal lord or because of social custom backed by the force of law. According to Dobb, it is the internal relationship of the feudal mode of production that determines the system's disintegration or its survival. Evidence indicates that it was the inefficiency and incapability of feudalism as a mode of production that failed to satisfy the material demands placed upon it and the growing need of the ruling class for enhanced revenue that was primarily responsible for its decline. Rodney Hilton lends full support to the theory of Dobb. He agrees that the growth and decay of feudalism was the result of the factors operating within it, and he considers feudal rent to be the prime mover. He provides an explanation of the inner workings of feudal society. He suggests that the fundamental law of feudal society was the tendency of the exploiting class to realize the maximum rent from the labor of the direct producers. This conflicted with the necessities of social growth, resulted in a contradiction within the exploiting class itself. The members of this class strove to increase the feudal rent in order to maintain and improve their position, and began competing with others to establish their domination. Thus, it was the struggle for power and land control that ignited the crisis in which feudal rent became the prime mover. Takahashi strongly defends Dobb's arguments. He maintains that it is the nature of social existence of labor power that is the basic or decisive factor in the various models of production. Dobb-Sweezy and Immanuel Wallerstein bring out the role of market and exchange economy in the decline of feudalism in somewhat different ways. Sweezy, in a criticism of Dobb's work in an essay titled Feudalism, a Critique, published in Science and Society in 1950, objects to Dobb's identification of feudalism with serfdom as interchangeable terms. Dobb had defined feudalism by revealing the characteristics of serfdom, an obligation placed on the producer by force and independent of his own volition to fulfill certain economic demands of an overlord. The exchange relations perspectives of Sweezy defines capitalism as a system of production for profit through market exchange that depends on an international trade-based division of labor. He argues that since feudal society was a system of production for use, there existed no internal dynamic that would stimulate long-term growth and expansion, leave alone the capability of transforming into capitalism. According to him, the rise of exchange economy that led to monetization of relations between feudal lords and the peasant mass somehow signaled the dissolution of feudalism. Sweezy asks Dobb to explain why feudalism remained stable or static despite facing chronic instability and insecurity. He charges Dobb for not explaining the change-resistant character of Western feudalism, nor does he probe deep enough into the effects of trade on feudalism. He finds Dobb's concept of feudalism defective, and he contends that some serfdom can exist in systems that are not feudal. Sweezy maintains that Dobb's theory of the internal causation could still be rescued if he had shown that the rise of the towns was a process internal to the feudal system. Since trade can in no sense be regarded as a form of feudal economy, it cannot be that the rise of urban life was a consequence of internal feudal causes. The rise of the towns, according to Sweezy, was fairly general throughout Western Europe and not only attracted serfs from the manors but altered the social relations in the countryside by showing the remaining population a better quality of life. Thus, a changed economic order forced the adoption of new forms of production relations and organizations to meet the new requirements. On the subject of divergent trends between Western and Eastern Europe, Sweezy suggests that the limited development of town life and lack of urban centers offered little alternative to the agricultural workforce in Eastern Europe. Limited market structure checked the rise of capitalism there. The fundamental difference between Dobb and Sweezy is on the question of trade and urban centers, whether these existed within the feudal structure or outside it. Dobb reiterated his stand that trade exercised its influence to the extent that it accentuated the internal conflict within the old mode of production, and the growth of towns was a process internal to the feudal system. He also discounts Sweezy's contention that there was a co-relationship between feudal disintegration and the nearness to centers of trade. An important contributor to this debate is Immanuel Wallerstein. He too stresses on the changing character of the market structure in his provocative work, The Origins of the Modern World System. This is the end of the discussion of part 1. Like our video and comment. Listen to our podcast episodes. Follow our official Facebook page, Twitter handle and Instagram. For any query, feel free to mail us. For details, see the description.